Hey folks, in today's video it's a bit special. I don't want to use the grid, I don't want to use Bitwig, I want to use pure data as in the form of Plugdata. It's a plugin inside of the DAW. It's completely free, open source, but stay with me. I try to keep it simple and fun. And it's also beneficial to have this knowledge maybe later on if you plan to create your own plugins or maybe for prototyping, Eurorec stuff and so on. But it's a fun way of doing things sometimes to explore this, and yeah, why not? So let's start here with Bitwig. I'm using basically here as an input some kind of piano, just basic stuff, something we can sample in the Plugdata. Maybe it's too quiet, huh? Okay. So after this plugin, we use here Plugdata, FX. It's basically an FX VST plugin. And as I said, this is completely free and open source. This is the nightly build here, maybe not completely stable, but I want to show you here the new additions to the interface. We have here now on the left side some high-level modules: bit crusher, chorus, delay, drive, flanger, phaser. Stuff like you want to use in a Eurorec environment, or maybe reactor blocks, or maybe the grid itself. So more like higher level stuff. Need to have. But this time we want to go deep and dirty, and we create a new patch here. This is how it looks like. In here, in this completely empty canvas, we create a new module, and this new module is created by double clicking on the empty space. We get this input here and we type in ADC, and it wants to complete to ADC tilde, which we accept with tab and hit return. We can zoom in here by using control and mouse wheel, just to zoom in a bit. And this ADC is basically a digital audio converter bringing in audio signals from the DAW. And there's also another module. Double click here and use DAC and tilde, and basically this tilde means that this module operates at audio rate. That's important to know. Also this orange here, these orange input jacks or output jacks, mean basically we have here signals at audio rate, and blue is basically data, just pure data. Yeah, pure data. So the simplest connection we can do is basically here connecting the input, left channel, right channel, with the output, and just pass through the audio. But that's pretty boring, so we want to process the audio, so we just cut this here by selecting the wires and hit delete. And we want to write this audio data inside of an recorder or sampler. Inside of pure data we have nothing like that, we have to use an array. You can find this on top here. Basically, also here the object browser is pretty new. We have some categories here, which is pretty neat. But most of the times you just need the top ones here, the top modules. So we use an array here by just clicking and dragging this out. Or we can use hotkey, Control Shift and A, where I just drag this out. I select here basically the array 1, and we can go to the inspector here and rename this to, let's say, sampler. And then we have a size, and the size is basically not the size of the visual representation here, it's more like the size of the array. So we have 100 data points. And we want to sample 2 seconds of data. So when we go here to the settings of Bitwig audio, sample rate is 48,000 Hertz, which means this is 1 second, right? We need 48,000 data points for just 1 second. If we want to sample 2 seconds of data, we have to go up to twice as much, so 96, right? So I'm typing in here 96,000 data points. That's what we want to save. So exactly 2 seconds. So we can see there are no input jacks here on the sampler now, on the array. So we have to use another module. We double click here and use tab right. There's a tilde also there, which means we operate at audio rate. So we hit tab, and now we need to insert a space. And in my case here, in Bitwig captures for some reason the input. So every time I press space here, I just, hit play on the transport in Bitwig. So I need to use control and space to insert actually a space. And now we want to insert here the name, as it also says here, symbol sets table name with the sample. So we type in the array name, which is sampler. So sampler. So we want to tab write data into the sampler. Easy. And we take here the input, left channel, right channel, sum it, and put it into the sampler. And you are right, this is mono. If you want to have this in stereo, you have to use 2 tab writes and 2 arrays for the left and the right channel. But I want to keep it simple. I just use 1 for the sake of this tutorial. It's just so you know, just for info. So if you right click on this here and use reference, you can see we have here inlets 1. There's only 1 inlet. It's 1 input jack basically. But this one accepts 2 signals. The first one is here a signal, which is basically what we already have. That's the input signal. Signal to write to an array. That's the data we want to write to the array. And the second one is a bang, starts recording into the array. And in pure data, a bang is basically a trigger, but they call it bang for no reason. So we can drag in here basically a bang button to bang it. That's terminology, sorry. So we connect here the output of this, also here with the input. So because we have here a bang signal and the audio signal, the module can distinguish between these two pretty easily. So you can just use 1 input jack for some reason. That's how it works basically. So with the push of this button, we can start the recording process. But you can't push it at the moment. Because we are in edit mode here at the top, right? So we have to go to run mode. In run mode, you can't change these modules, you can't change values, but you can interact with here with the interface elements. So now we have to play something on the piano and we have to push record. You can see it records until it reaches here the end of the array. But you can't hear nothing because we need now to read something out of the array. And we can do this by using another module, which is called, of course, tab read tilt. And we also insert here a space and the name of the array, so sampler. And here to playback actually something from the array, it's not that easy as just attaching a bang to hit play and stop and so on. This one wants to have some kind of positioning signal, some kind of phase signal. So here it says signal sets table index and output its value. It's weirdly worded, but what it means basically, you need to send in some kind of number, and the number is then the position or the index. And we have here, as you remember, 96,000 indexes basically. So to do this over and over, basically 1 index after the other, so it is some kind of playback happening. We can do this, for instance, like with a phasor. And the phasor works exactly here also in the tilt version, phase ramp generator. So we hit tab. The phasor is basically something that generates a ramp. And you can input here a frequency number and it outputs then basically this ramp at this frequency. And I show you how this looks like here in a scope. So we use the scope here. Maybe we can resize this a bit. Output of the phasor goes in here, and now we need a number or a float. Yeah, float does it also. And when we change now here the frequency or the input number, the frequency changes of the phasor and the ramp signal basically gets longer or wider. You can see this in a moment. But I don't want to use here the run mode for this. I want to show you also that you can hold down control here. If you hold down control, you can see here some of these elements become gray. And when you hold down control, you can interact with these knobs here. Even you are still in edit mode, so you don't need to switch to run mode all the time. You can just quickly, dynamically switch to this run mode by holding down control. So now you can see we have here 9, that's the frequency. And the phasor generates here some kind of ramp signal all the time. It outputs a ramp signal from 0 to 1 over and over. It's basically some kind of LFO that operates between 0 and 1. The problem now is that we don't need a signal between 0 and 1. We need a signal between 0 and 96,000 because we want to use this ramp signal to scrub through the array. That's what we want to do. Maybe I use here a different draw mode. Maybe I use here polygon or something. Yeah, something like this. Okay, so we want to scrub through the array buffer here with the phasor. So we have to multiply basically the signal. So we insert here a new module, double click, use a star, which means multiply. And we want to use this multiply also with the tilt version at audio rate. So we hit here insert. And now it gives us here basically a second input jack, which is kind of what we want to use to multiply the signal with. So we want to use this signal and then we want to multiply it here with a different signal. But the second signal is basically not dynamic. I don't want to change it. I want to keep it static. So I can also input this here as a default value. And the default value is 96,000. Oh, that's the wrong thing. So we take basically this input signal, multiply it here with this number, and then we get basically a signal between 0 and this number. Does it make sense? Because the output of the phasor is between 0 and 1 times this number, and then 1 instead of 1 we get basically this number. So it's a ramp signal between 0 and 96,000. So we can use this to go from here to here. So we use this as an input for the tab read. We can delete this here now. Oh, we need this actually. So, and yeah, we scrub basically with this through the sampler. And this gives us already, I think, some output here. It's a bit too fast, so we can slow it down. So we can change the playback speed here with this frequency of the phasor, which then gets multiplied, and then we use this as a positioning signal for the array. And then the array outputs this here like a sampler. And we can change the frequency and change the pitch. And if you go negative, it's actually backwards. Right? So we already have some nice features to actually sample something, and we have some influence over the output of this plugin. So far I think it's pretty simple, right? It's not that hard. Audio in, tab write, we trigger the writing here, gets written into the array. The array is exactly 2 seconds long. Then we have here a phasor. The phasor is multiplied by the length of the array, and then we use this as a positioning signal to read the array, and then the array gets the values out into the DAW again, and we basically have a playback. Pretty simple, I think, so far. So this is already a nice lesson you can try out with Plugdata and have some fun. But I don't want to show you more things, right? That's not all. So we can also delete this here because the phasor is neat to play back audio at different rates. It can be fun, but we want to actually also play this audio back in exactly the same speed as we sampled it, right? And you can do this more easily by using a V-line, for instance here. V-line basically generates also a ramp. It's in the reference here, it also says it's a signal generator. It accepts basically target value and start ramp, set next ramp time, sets delay time. Okay, so we can input here basically a message. Let me see here. Yeah, it inputs. It needs some float as input, and we can do this here with a message. We drag this in, and into the message we write basically the start position, which is 0, which is the start of the ramp, and we hit here a comma, and then we insert basically the endpoint, which is 96,000, and then we insert the space, and then we want to insert here the time frame of this. So we want to have a ramp between 0 and 96,000 in the time frame of 2 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second or 2 seconds. So we hit return, feed this here into the V line, and the V line goes into the tab reader, and the tab reader goes into the output, and then we can hit control and play it back. So control and push, and we play it back. But you can see we have here still some output, right, at the end of Plugdata. So something is wrong. And the problem here is basically that we are stuck at the end of this array, and we're using the last index, the last value of this index as an output all the time. Nothing changes, right? And we can prevent this in multiple ways. And I want to introduce here some kind of second VLine to have a fade in and a fade out at the end, okay? So we keep this here as it is, and we use a second VLine for the volume instead of the phase. And we use also here a second message. And this time we want to fade in. So we go from 0, which is 0 volume, up to 1, which is the maximum volume, over the time frame of 100 milliseconds. And we go here into the VLine. Okay. And then we want to introduce here a multiplication, also the tilt version, because it's audio rate. And we want to use here this in between the output. So we use here shift to sneak this in between. And this goes also here in the right channel. So then the VLine goes in here. So this changes basically the volume. So multiplication here with 0 is basically 0 volume. It's completely quiet, and 1 is the maximum value. So the VLine also goes from, let's trigger this here, has a slow ramp basically. You can see this here, it goes slowly up from 0 up to 1. So that's something we want to trigger every time we hit play. And we can do this by just doing like this. So when I push this, this is also triggered. Or we can do something like use a bang here. And we can call this, for instance, with a comment, we can call this playback, right? And this one triggers here this message, and it also triggers this message. And we trigger basically 2 VLines at the same time. One is for the phase signal, and one is for the volume fade or for the fade in. So now we have a fade in, but we also need a fade out at the end. So how do we do this? We actually duplicate here this message, and we go also here with this node or with this wire here in the first input jack. And this one here is then a fade out. So the fade out is going from maximum volume, which is 1, down to 0 volume, which is 0, over the time frame of 100 milliseconds. It's perfect. So we need to trigger this here at a certain point in time, and the exact time frame is basically, this is 2000 milliseconds, and we want to trigger basically 100 milliseconds earlier, like here, so it's enough time to fade out. So we insert here a delay, and the delay is 1900, so it's basically 2000 minus 100. So we have like this, and we trigger this here also with the play button. So maybe let's move this down here. So when we trigger this here, we start the playback, we start the fade in, and then after 1900 or 1900, that's how it's called in UK, I think, 1900 milliseconds, you trigger the fade out. And then after 100 milliseconds, basically we are stuck at the end here. So this should work, in my opinion. Right, so we have a fade in, then we play back everything, and exactly 100 milliseconds before the end, we fade out. And then we have a nice ramp in, ramp out, no clicking, no popping, and you also are not stuck at the end here with the last sample value. So pretty easy. I hope this is clear so far what I did here. Actually, it's nothing changed as before. Instead of the phasor, we're using here the VLine, and the VLine accepts here basically this nice little message format where you start at a value, end up on a value, and then you type in the milliseconds for the time frame for the V-line, and then the V-line processes this and actually produces some kind of ramp signal. So pretty neat actually. So what we can do now is we can first, instead of going from 0 to the maximum value, we go from the maximum value down to 0, which gives us kind of reversed playback. So let's try this. Okay. This works nice. And then I don't want to push this button all the time. I want to have this triggered for me, right, automatically. So let's move this down here a bit. And let's use another module called metro or metronome. Sends a message periodically. It's exactly what we need. So we use this here. Connect here this with the output and input to the bang. And we also use here another bang, or maybe we just remove this here. Push this here in, and then use a bang here. Connect this. Call this playback. And then we can use here a second input, and the second input takes basically a number. And the number is also milliseconds for, yeah, let's say the distance between the bangs. So we connect this here. And we type in 2000, okay. So the distance between two bangs is exactly the time we need to play back this whole array buffer. I hope this makes sense. And if you look up here the reference for the metro, or for the metronome, it also accepts here a method, a message, stop the metronome. That's also what we need to implement. So we use a message here, type in stop, and we put this also in here. Okay, so we can push this to start, push this to stop, and between the bangs we have exactly 2000 milliseconds, which we use then to play back this thing every 2 seconds. Okay, so let's try this out. It doesn't work. Fantastic. And that's because we also need to trigger the fade in here and the fade out. So we have a start button, we have a stop button, we have fade in, we have a fade out, we can record here. So what we want to do now is probably also to record all the time. So it's more like a granular delay or something like this. I don't know how to call it. So we can just use here the output of the metronome and feed it back into the sampler bang here to sample every time we play back. Maybe it doesn't work. Let's see, and push record here and play something. So it looks like it works. The problem now is we only hear basically the process signal that's coming from the array. Maybe it's also interesting to also hear the dry input and mix it, blend it with the wet signal, kind of. So we can do this by using a second output here, DAC. You can also use just this one here, but for the sake of for the visual clutter, I just use a second one. And then we can maybe also use here a second input. And let's use here for that a multiply. Yeah, let's go with the multiply. Also the tilt one. And we use this for the left channel. Duplicates. I don't know why it's doing this here. Let's do it this way. Put this in. And now we can use maybe a knob or a slider, depends on what you want to use. I use here a knob. And the knob is a range between 0 and 127. That's not what we need. We need maximum value of 1. So 1 is like here, the volume, 0 is no volume or no gain at all, and 1 is the maximum gain. It's the same here. So we have a value between 0 and 1. We can use this directly as an input here for the multiplies. You can basically change how loud the dry signal is. You can also input here a comment, not an object. I want to insert a comment, this one. And that's the dry signal, or level actually, it's a dry level. And yeah, let's use this. Nice. So instead of using a dry level, or additionally, we can also just duplicate this here and do the same thing basically for the left and right channel here, down here, like this, and say this is the wet level. And then can put this maybe on different positions here, up here. Something like this. Presentation mode. Not so good, but it kind of works. There's still some clicks and pops here and there. Maybe I have to increase here the delay times. Maybe 200 here. Make it more soft. I have no idea. Maybe I do something wrong. So here go for 800. It's at least in parts smooth. So yeah, I want to give you basically an idea how you do something in Plugdata with the array. I'll give you some ideas. There's a lot of stuff you can implement, and you probably already have some ideas to try out. At least with the pitch up and pitch down, you know, put stuff an octave higher, octave lower, half time, double time, reversed playback, and so on. And you can imagine if you combine this here with multiple arrays, sampling at different positions in time and playback in different time frames and so on, you can create interesting audio effects just with this basic setup. So yeah, I want to show you Plugdata, how it looks like now, the grand state of it. Like I said, this is the nightly builds, maybe not that stable, but you can also build this in the stable version. The link is in the description below. I also put this patch here I made in the description below, so you can download it and try it out for yourself and have some fun. So like I said, it's beneficial to know all that stuff, the signal flow stuff. It helps you also in the grid and reactor and all kinds of modular environments. It's kind of all the same language. Everything kind of works the same. Also, when you code at some point in the future, maybe some plugins, the signal flow is the same thing. You probably implement this more like in code instead of in a visual language. but the steps and the things you have to do are kind of the same. Okay, so that's what I want to say with this. So learning this is, even though it's pretty old, it's a pretty old language. Pure data is around since, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years, even longer. But it's still used in the industry for prototyping stuff, and there's still a lot of knowledge around, and learning this is never wasted time, in my opinion. So try it out. Links are in the description below. Leave a thumbs up if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel, super important, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.